Welcome to IVF This, episode 114, IVF'ers Like Us with Emily M. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you're all doing so well today. I am beyond delighted to bring this episode to you today. So this is a person, Emily M., another Emily, 2 of us this week. And she had been a client of mine for a while. I think we did about 6 months together. And through that, she is going to share her journey, which is so incredible, how she has gotten from where she was when we first started together and to where she is right now. And I'll let her do it because she's the only one who can do it justice. I'm really excited to share this episode specifically because Emily used donor material. And this is a kind of a hotly contested topic. A lot of people have questions about donor material. And so she's going to share a little bit about her experience along with kind of the broad strokes of her experience, just to show you that there are so many stories out there, so many more stories than I think people really understand around IVF and infertility. So I'm delighted to bring this episode to you today. So I hope you enjoy, and I will talk to you soon. Hi, friends. I'm so excited to bring you my friend, another Emily. Y'all aren't even ready for 2 Emilys today, but here we are. I've got my very dear friend, former client, Emily M. Emily, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, it's been a dream of mine to have you on this podcast because interestingly, and we're going to share a little bit, I want to hear about your story, but Emily is one of the few people who actually didn't find me from my podcast, right? Tell me, how did you find, it was like a referral, right?
Yeah, so I had a friend that had a life coach for a different reason. And when I was kind of explaining issues I was having, she said, I think you could really benefit from a life coach. So her coach found a few infertility related coaches on Facebook, and that's how we found you.
Oh, that's so fabulous. Okay, so it's a very circuitous coming back to it and we'll talk about like how you found me and what those things were that you were kind of describing to your friend that led you down this path. But to start, you have a really unique story, number 1. And that's why I wanted to make sure that your story was heard, because it was not a video, a recording straight to the video. It was, you guys have gone through a lot of different iterations of this journey. So start by telling us about your journey and kind of where you are right now.
Yeah, definitely. So we were first kind of trying on our own for about a year. And then when that wasn't working, we decided to see an infertility doctor. So we went to a clinic. We originally thought it was male factor infertility. My husband had just low morphology, but they didn't think that was really going to make a huge difference. But we did our first round of IVF. They said, IVF was probably the most, would give us the best chances. So we decided to proceed with IVF. After that round didn't work, it turned out I had PCOS, with pretty severe egg quality issues. I also had a uterine septum, had that removed throughout 4 different hysteroscopies. And then we did 3 more rounds of IVF with no success there. And then we decided to move on to using donor eggs because we just knew that, my eggs were just, the quality was not there. So my sister decided to donate her eggs, and we proceeded with that. That's as close genetically as we're going to get. So my sister donated her eggs. We ended up with 2 embryos, transferred one July of last year, and now we have a 2-month-old baby boy.
Who's absolute perfection. That head of hair, ma'am, that
Yeah.
head of hair on that baby is so perfect.
He's got a lot.
It's as well he should. He gave you lots of heartburn there.
He sure did.
So for those of you who are listening and maybe have questions, morphology is one of the 3 or 4 factors that doctors look at when they look at sperm quality. So motility is their ability to swim. Morphology is like the shape. Does it have one tail? Does it have 2 tails, 1 head, 2 head, things like that? So that's a really important thing for reproductive endocrinologists to know, because if it is a sperm quality or quantity issue, IVF really is kind of the proven modality for pregnancy. Now, tell us a little bit, just a little bit. We don't have to spend a lot of time, but help explain the uterus septum or the uterine septum.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that basically is just something that I was born with, where there's a large piece of tissue that extends all the way from the top of the uterus all the way. Mine was down through my cervix. So basically your uterus is full of tissue. There was very little space in there. So that was potentially one reason why we couldn't get pregnant on our own, was because there was really nowhere for sperm to go. But it turned out that was not the case. And regardless, we needed to get that taken care of, because I couldn't have safely carried a baby like that.
Right. And so, as you were kind of telling the story, I want to make sure people understand your cycles wasn't just that they didn't work. I mean, ultimately, that's like the umbrella term. They were failed cycles, or they didn't work. But there were times that you had embryos and they did not survive the defrost.
Yep, that did happen.
You went through one cycle where where you ovulated early.
Yes. That was our second. So the first cycle, we got 2 embryos. We did not do PGT testing. It didn't really seem necessary. Just we're younger, don't have a history of anything that would make us need to do that. So we did not. The first embryo we transferred, that failed. But when they thawed it didn't really expand like they would have liked to see. So my doctor had already given me, a 50-50 chance there. And then, so that didn't work. And then we went to transfer the second one. And as we were walking out the door, literally, to go to our appointment for the transfer, they called and said, your embryo didn't make it through the thaw, and, you don't have any more. So that was the end of the first round. And then the second, I ovulated early, so a couple days before. So they ended up retrieving 9 eggs, which from someone with PCOS is not many at all. I think only 3 were mature and none fertilized. And then the third round, that one we got several eggs, but none of them made it to, day 5. And then I believe it was the 4th round that we decided to transfer 3 day 3 embryos. So we did that just to see if that would make a difference, but that did not, and the rest of the embryos didn't survive to day 5. So that was kind of the first 4.
And then at some point, maybe cycle 2 or 3, you developed OHSS, ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome.
It was either 2 or 3. I can't remember now. Yeah, it was a while ago.
Yep. So when we say that you've been through it, so you have been through it. You have kind of like the path that we've taken has been so up and down this entire time. And I think, number one, that's really important for people to understand, particularly people who might be very new to the world of fertility treatments. I think there's a cultural misunderstanding that IVF is like a guarantee.
For sure.
Or that it's going to only take 1, maybe 2 cycles. But honestly, the national average is about 4 cycles.
Yeah, and I didn't know that going into it. Yeah.
ma'am, that's a closely kept secret. We don't, for whatever reason, right? A lot of reproductive endocrinologists or consultants will talk about how, this is a marathon, not a sprint. But I think in terms of truly understanding the gravity of the potential for what we're looking at, it can take multiple cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And then most importantly is the relationship you had with your sister and her using donor material. So talk to me a little bit about like when that first started. Like what were the conversations like around when y'all first started talking about it and then ultimately making the decision and then moving forward?
Yeah, so we had always kind of talked about my sister. I have two sisters. We're all fairly close, and back when we thought that it was maybe my uterus that was the problem, my sister had offered, if you ever needed me to be a surrogate or something. She has two children of her own, so she knows what it's like to be pregnant and everything. So she had always offered that option as well. And then after our fourth failed cycle, we didn't know what the next steps were going to be. And then we took a little vacation, and while we were on vacation, actually right before we left, my older sister had told me, if you want to, I would donate my eggs, and, you guys could do that. So we kind of talked about it because, I mean, it's a, it's a different type of scenario because it is someone and you have to think about, whether or not you really want to do that. But ultimately, we definitely did. And then we decided right when we got back, we started. So.
Oh, I love it so much. And we had great success, right? She only did one round, yeah?
Yep, just one round. Actually, surprisingly enough, my sister also has PCOS, but we did not know that going into it because she has two kids of her own. So, and had no issues with either one of those. So she actually got a lot of eggs too. And we only got two embryos, which I say only, that's way better than none. So it ended up working out because we now have our baby boy, but then we still have one frozen embryo.
Yeah. Okay. I did not know that last part. I'm so glad you shared with us. Okay. Yeah. So back to the original question. The first question I asked you was, how did you find me? So you had a friend, she had a life coach. I think it was like a dating coach or a heartbreak coach.
It was a breakup coach.
Correctly.
Yep.
Breakup coach. Mm-hmm. And so you were kind of telling her, what were some of the things that you were expressing to your friend that she was like, hey, I think you could really benefit from a coach?
I think coaching kind of changed her mentality, and so she, knowing that I was going through a hard time, would always reach out and ask me how I was doing. She was, one of the few that while she didn't understand what I was going through, she always checked in, to make sure I was okay. And I was just telling her, how upset I was, and I just, didn't know what to do and was just feeling sad all the time. And, she said, maybe you would benefit from a life coach. She said she told me it was the best investment she ever made was investing in herself like that. She said she does not regret it, and I definitely could look into it. So I definitely was like, I'll think about it. So, and that's when her coach, found a few different infertility related life coaches on Facebook. And I went and listened to a few of the podcasts. I think most of them, if not all, at least had a podcast or a website or something I could kind of look and see a little bit about you guys and listen. So that's how I found you.
So what made you decide to contact me? If we had at least like 3 or 4 options. What was like, other than the Emily, there's a camaraderie amongst Emily's, I think.
Yeah, I think just the things that you kind of talked about in like the first few episodes of your podcast just were like, okay, just the way that you went through IVF yourself. And that's definitely helpful to have somebody that knows what it's like, because I think it's sometimes is hard for people to understand, what you're going through unless they've gone through it themselves. So that was definitely a big thing. And then just your personality, I thought, would fit with mine.
which it does because we're both amazing. And I think that also brings up a really good point, is that I often tell people, because IVF infertility can be a pretty lonely experience. It doesn't have to be, but it can be, because especially IVF, I found there is a lot of like misunderstandings around IVF. There's a lot of like, I don't think, unless you've been through it, right? You don't understand kind of the gravity of it, the expense of it, but like financially, physically, emotionally. I kind of equate it to, unless it's like you're the person sitting on the front row of the funeral, you don't know until you know, right? There's not a problem with not knowing. That's not a problem, but you don't truly know until you know. And I think that is a common, certainly was something that I experienced, especially in the very early part of our IVF journey. So I think that's a very universal experience completely. What was the most impactful part of working with, I would say a coach, but what was the most impactful part of working together?
I mean, coaching really helped me get through all the rest of my IVF infertility journey and continue past that. I still use things that we talked about, like concepts and topics we talked about. I still use them now. I think just in order to get through it, that kind of was the biggest impact, just being able to get through the rest of IVF and be okay with, I was sad a lot and I didn't quite understand, why I was feeling the way I was feeling and things like that. So I think just understanding my emotions and, not being so hard on myself, I think had the biggest impact and was the reason for why I was able to keep going.
I love that. And I think, so I really remember at some point in our work together, you had started mentioning that sister was offering, or I think originally she had kind of flippantly said, I'll give you my eggs or something like that.
Yeah, it was kind of jokingly at first. Yeah.
Right. You want my uterus? You can have my uterus. You can have my
Right.
eggs, whatever. It was like a fire sale for your sister. But I think one of the things that I remember mostly was a conversation that we had that I think is kind of a universal experience for anyone who's using donor material. And that's, will I love the baby the same way or the way in which it would deserve if it's not truly genetically mine? So I'd be really interested. What is your take? I remember, but I want to hear from you. What were your original thoughts about it, and where do you land on that now?
Yeah, so that is something that I was worried about. I was worried not only about how I would feel, but how other people would feel too. Like, would people, if they knew, because I would always want to be open with the child, about that so that they understand their background, their genetics and everything. And I worried about, yes, would I love this baby as much as if it were biologically mine? Or, it was just very foreign to me. I never in a million years thought I'd be using donor anything, much less donor eggs. So, and just, yeah, worried about what other people thought too, if people would think less of the child or anything, especially if it was a donor from outside of my family. Would people really, in my family, would they act like it was still part of the family? Now, that was a lot of thoughts that had gone through my head around that. Once we decided to do it, and once I got pregnant, I would forget all the time that he was from a donor egg. I still forget all the time. I don't ever really think about it. The only time I think about it is when I'm filling out paperwork for a doctor. That's, biological parents, family history, things like that. And all of my worries about people, judging or not loving the child any, loving them less is not, we don't have any issues with that. He is the most spoiled in my family, that's for sure. And I mean, love him with everything. I don't even ever think about it. All I think about is how much how hard I worked in order to get him here and how just happy I am that we're finally at this point.
Yeah, I love that so much because I think I had a client who had lost a tremendous amount of weight in her like late 20s, and this was now 10 years later. She'd kept it off, and she said, I kind of think about this in terms of my weight loss was that once I got there, it didn't matter how long it took. Not that it didn't matter, but it mattered considerably less than when I was in it.
Mm-hmm.
As once baby boy was here, it was kind of like, okay,
Yeah,
we're here now.
Yep.
We're here. We're doing this. That's what matters. So I love that so much. Now you mentioned that you still use like some of the talking points, some of the concepts, things like that we did in our practice. What was maybe a concept or a topic that really resonated with you that you kind of think about or utilize over and over?
Well, I would say the main one, there's a couple, but I would say the main one is just that, life is typically 50-50. 50%, not so great, and 50% great. And that is so true. And I think going into coaching, I thought that it was going to be, oh, everything's rainbows and sunshine, don't be sad, but it wasn't that way. And I think that's so real because we forget sometimes that being sad and being upset is normal. And it's okay, to feel that way. And so I tell myself all the time, 50-50, Emily, 50-50. Every
50-50.
time I'm upset about something, I'm like 50-50. But
love it.
So that's probably the main one. I tell myself that probably once a week, honestly. And then really just the going through like the think, feel, do cycles. I still kind of do that, mentally. I think about, okay, well, what are my thoughts around this, and what is that making me do? And then also just, not changing your thoughts, but creating new ones. I still do that all the time. And I know I always used to practice them, and it sounded silly at first, like practicing new thoughts in your head and saying them out loud, but it really, really does help. And I still do that to this day.
I do. That's one thing I remember when we first started working together. You're like, you didn't totally buy into the premise.
Right.
You were like,
Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
I'll write some stuff down on Post-it notes and put it around my desk or my mirror. Okay, Emily, that's fine, whatever.
Oh yeah. Post-it notes.
So I love, I love Post-it notes. They're amazing. But I love that was kind of one of the things you not balked at, but you didn't totally, again, it didn't totally buy into the premise, but that's something that still resonates with you. That just is so wonderful.
Definitely. It works.
I love it. So I have one, but what is your favorite memory of us working together?
Oh gosh. Well, my favorite memory was probably the fact that you were the first person that I called when I found out that I was pregnant. So that's probably my absolute favorite. Could not wait to tell you that. I mean, that's probably, number one for sure, but
For sure.
I don't know that I have a favorite like session. I looked forward every week to meeting with you, really. Even if it was just a week where I was really upset and we just needed to kind of chat about a few things. It was great. I always looked forward to it.
Oh man, I'm so glad you brought up. Yes, I was the first person. Hold on, before anyone on the podcast listening rebukes what just happened. Only because her husband, you wanted to surprise him. You wanted to do like the announcement, and she just had to tell someone.
Yes.
And so I was that someone.
I needed to tell someone. Yes.
Yes. So that's in line with like my favorite memory, which we hadn't actually been working together by that point for a few months, probably. We'd kept in touch, but like session wise, it had been a while. But it had been
a little while. Yeah.
You had sent me a video of when you did tell your husband, and it was this beautiful moment of him walking into the house, and he's kind of like, what's going on? Like the dogs are acting crazy. And then I guess you had like baby M or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
he just bursts into tears, and you can hear him say, I didn't think it would work for us, or something like that. And
something like that.
I got chills now. Oh my goodness. It was just the most, and with your permission, I shared it with my husband, and he was like,
oh yeah.
He's had so much love for your husband in that moment, because he looked at me and he was like, I know that feeling. Like, it's so visceral that it's like, for the first time, you guys had gotten to see a pregnancy, like a positive pregnancy test.
Yep, that was the very first time.
I do know, I kind of like you, I don't really have anything specific. I do know that there would be times during our sessions where we would just get absolutely feral and just laugh and cut up. Coaching, for anyone who's listening, who's like on the fence about coaching because it feels like it's going to be heavy and a lot of work, I guarantee you that is not the way I run things. Life is hard enough. I want us to have fun. I want us to get some work done. And we would
for
laugh.
Sure. I mean, I came into it really thinking it was going to be like therapy, like let's, but it's nothing like that. It was like meeting with a friend every week, and, I would definitely benefited from it, but meeting with a friend, talking through things, and, agree. It was fun, very fun.
And, I will say, for those of you listening, Emily is a tremendous baker. And you live in Missouri, but you came to Austin for a concert, and you brought me a dozen cookies, and I shamelessly did not share with any member of my family. I ate none of them. None.
I don't blame you.
No, nor should you, because they were delicious. But I froze some of them so that I could continue having them over many weeks. My husband even asked for a couple. I was like, I don't know who you think you're talking to, but Joey doesn't share food. So that's a Friends reference for anyone who's listening. Okay. So most importantly, what would your advice be to another IVFer, whether they're just starting, whether they're slogging through it right now? What would you say?
Definitely that, it can feel very lonely, but there are people out there who you can talk to, who can help you. It's a long journey. When I first started IVF, I thought it was going to be one round and done, and I was going to get pregnant because that's what I had seen. So just because you don't know anyone who has gone through your specific situation doesn't mean there's no one out there who has. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask people for help, because I truly think that's what changed my mindset and what got me to where I am right now, for sure.
Oh, I love it so much. Yes, you're never alone. You're never actually alone. Your inner rude brain may tell you that you're alone, but you're never actually alone. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being here and for sharing your story. And on a personal note, thank you just for being you. You're wonderful, and I adore you. So thank you for coming on the podcast.
Not a problem. Thanks for asking me to be on it. It was fun. I was really looking forward to it. So
I know, and this is our second go. You had like a throat, like you lost your voice for a couple of weeks. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, haven't lost my voice since I was a kid. And the day that we were going to do it, woke up with no voice. I'm like, I'm cursed. I don't know.
Because of course, right? Because of course. And we just laugh and we regroup.
That is my luck.
And we go on.
Yep.
All right.
And we try again.
All right, my beautiful friend. I will talk to you later. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.